Well, hello there. Top Dog here. Thank you very much indeed for offering your time to do screening for the adoption applicants at this next event. Danielle Pigeon is one of your fabulous application coordinators. She will be receiving the applications and then assigning them to you. She will also be a great point of contact for lots of questions. Michelle and Amanda are your other two amazing application coordinators, and what they do is they take all the information that you enter on your forms and create the summary letters that your applicants get to bring with them to the event and get to choose their new puppy. They also coordinate with you and the rescues so that they also have all the information that you collect. Everett is our youngest screener ever, and as you will hear, has lots of questions for Danielle. So at the event, 15 rescues will come with up to 350 dogs. We'll have over 2,000 people, but 400 of them will have applied beforehand, and it'll be you who will be screening them so that at least 300 will be able to come in at 10 o'clock and have the pick of the pups.
So basically you're performing interviews, and it's a set of questions that are all on these live forms that I've sent to all of you. So what happens is I get all of the applications directly to my email. I then forward it to you. It's going to come through this year saying GAA, so General Adoption Application, and then it'll say the applicant's name after it. So that'll make life a lot easier for looking through everything. If there's anything immediately on the application that I feel needs to be addressed, if they've answered a question in a way that, makes me think twice, I'll let you know. I'll say, hey, by the way, can you just mention that? Otherwise, just go on. So it's going to open up today. They're going to start really slow, and then they're going to get nuts in the last 2 weeks. As all of my veteran people know, if I'm sending you too many, if you can't take another one, or if you can, let me know. I don't want to give you more than you can handle, but if you're sitting around and you're waiting for something, let me know too. Because definitely towards the last 2 weeks, you're going to be pretty busy with it. But of course, if you're at your limit, I don't want to put you into more than you can handle, unless you're Amanda, and then you can handle anything. So one thing to make sure that you stress with the applicants is that pre-screening does not guarantee adoption on the day. So it's going to put them in the best shape possible, but all the individual rescues will make that decision for the specific dog that person wants to adopt, and they'll make the best decision for that dog. And they also may have different requirements. Certain rescues do home visits, certain rescues need to, any additional information. So being pre-screened, they're not guaranteed a dog, but they're in the best shape possible. If the applicant has a landlord, if they live in a condo, or if they live with parents, or they are not the homeowner, we have to talk to either the landlord, the condo association, or the homeowner, whether it be parents or, a friend or something like that. So that will be the form that you have to fill out first. We'll be making sure that you've cleared it with the landlord or the condo or the parents. If you're doing an interview and you discover that the applicant does not own their home, even though they've stated it, we need to get permission from the homeowner. Obviously if it's a couple, it's a different story, but we've had situations where we get applicants that are like 19 or 20, they're living with their parents, and they are an adult, but it's still not their home, and there may not be restrictions like there be in a rental agreement, but perhaps because of their insurance, they can't have this, or just the parents would prefer that it be a smaller dog, etc. So we've added that in this year because we ran into a lot of situations where people were living with roommates or things like that. So it's helpful to have permission from everybody. Next thing we'd be doing would be the vet reference. If they have a dog or a cat currently, or if they've had a dog in the last 5 years, just to make sure that everything is up to date. And a good thing to remember is that these applicants have submitted an application, and then hopefully they're sitting by the phone and waiting for someone to call them. And because we're on a more of a constricted timeline, whereas a lot of the rescues that adopt out year-round, you can give like a week or two to call an applicant. we don't really have that luxury. So being able to start it, as quickly as possible. Obviously, if you get an application in the morning and you're available during the night, that's one thing. But we had a lot of people who were like holding on to applications for 3 days before even making an initial call. And if you're just busy and you can't get to it, that's fine. Just let me know. But just try to be courteous enough to reach out to them either via email or via phone and say like, hey, I'll probably be contacting you within the next day or so just to let you know. If you don't have time to do everything. So once you've finished an application, just email Michelle, Amanda, and myself letting us know that you're done with the application as long as it's all set for approval. In the case that you have found something that you would think that you need to deny this applicant for, let me know ahead of time. We'll talk it out. I'll talk to the applicant, and we're gonna get to specifics on all this. By the way, this is just kind of a very brief overview. And another important thing is that personal dogs are not allowed inside the event. So if they have a dog or dogs that they want to bring to the event, that is perfectly fine to meet the potential dog. They just cannot go inside the building. So there has to be somebody else with them, so someone can stand outside with the dog. And we have to have proof of rabies. That's good for that dog, and they'll have to check in at the doggy check-in. So they have to have more than one person with them so that someone can sit with the dog. We don't want the dogs being left in the car. In the instance that this person is a solitary person, they live on their own, they're going to get their own dog, in those rare occasions, we can find a volunteer to hold on to their dog, maybe, but no guarantees. So if they can bring a friend, a mother, a father, cousin, whatever, try to get them to do that just because the dog cannot come in. And that's just for health reasons mostly. Alright, so now I'm going to get on to all the specific forms that we're going to be doing. And this should be on your clipboard here. So the first thing I'm going to go over is all the red flags that we're looking out for. And one thing I want to make very, very clear is first and foremost, we're in a position to educate potential adopters. And educate is the key word here. We are not in a position to hear something that we consider bad or wrong and say, fuck off. Can I say that?
Why not?
I guess I have. These dogs are being saved from death. These dogs were going to die, and we have given them a chance at life. That is not to say we want to put them in a situation or circumstances where they're going to further be harmed, but there are certain things that can be talked about to ensure this dog's safety. So don't just hear one thing and automatically write a person off because, you feel as though, oh, they do this, so that, we're in a position to educate, and I think that's the most important. Another thing to remember is these are not always Adopt's dogs. So we're doing this on behalf of the rescues, and these are their red flags. These are their things that we are looking for. Whether you agree with it, whether Always Adopt agrees with it or not, these are the rescues things that they find important that we need to look out for. And as I said before, if I see one in an application, I'll mention it to you when I show you, when I send the email over to you. So if something comes up during the interview, just address it and educate the person. And if you're not comfortable with the educating aspect, let me know and I'll talk to them. If you're explaining something to the person and they don't seem very receptive to it, and just your gut feeling is like, you know what, they're not listening to me, let me know. Most people, depending on the circumstance, most people don't know things. Ignorance does not have to have a negative connotation. Some people just don't know something. And as long as they're receptive to what you're telling them, that's great. Now we've just educated that person and made them a better dog owner. But if you're telling them something that's just like, yeah, and you still think they're going to do something, let me know. So let's get to the red flags. So zip lines, tie-outs, outdoor kennels. Any indication that someone is going to leave the dog outside on any of these, either overnight or without supervision, that is something that is not safe or recommended. So zip lines and tie-outs and all that, they're fine if they're going to use it to let the dog go out to the bathroom. Maybe they don't have a fenced-in yard. That's great. As long as they're being supervised, as long as someone's, watching them and making sure that they're safe, that's perfectly fine. But overnight or without supervision, not okay. And then another important thing is that zip lines and tie-outs must not be used on small dogs, and that's because of the risk of tracheal collapse, because if they stop short and they're on a collar, they could collapse their trachea. And another thing to remember is when you're asking these people if they say that they're going to use a zip line or a tie-out, we're doing this in a generic form. So one of the things that's mentioned here is that if a dog has a strong prey drive, it's not recommended that they go on a tie-out, and that's because they're going to see something that they want to get, and they're going to run for it, and they're going to hurt themselves, they're going to break the tie, whatever. But in the instance that you're interviewing with this person, you don't know what dog they're getting. So if they're like, oh, I'm looking for a husky, which huskies have strong prey drive, don't say, oh, well, you can't use one. You have no idea where they're going to end up. Just make sure that it's noted that this person intends to use a tie-out, but is aware that in certain instances they may not be able to use one. One thing that came up a lot last year was the definition of kennel, because I guess some people call their crate a kennel, and everybody thinks a different thing about a kennel. The circumstances in which we're saying that kennels aren't allowed are those, like, outdoor dwellings that are considered a kennel, where they're going to be left, like, overnight or without supervision. That's what we're talking about. If they have a little doghouse outside that they like to leave their dog in, while they're going to the bathroom or shelter from the rain, that's different than one of those structured kennels that they're going to let the dog sit in for days. So that's what we mean when we use the word kennel. Okay. So if they're interested in a puppy, and they plan on leaving the puppy alone indoors, unattended, they need to be made aware that puppies can be very destructive to property and also harm to, the puppy themselves, and this is not recommended. Most people who are getting a puppy are pretty aware that they need to have some time and attention for the puppy, but not all people do. Some are like, yeah, I'll just leave him in the crate all day while I go to work, and puppies need a little bit more time. They need a little bit more attention.
Sorry to interrupt. Is he okay with a whole carrot?
He'll make it work.
Okay, good.
Sorry to interrupt. If he starts to die.
Okay.
We got it.
He's doing okay.
He chokes. Okay, we'll go.
Yeah, where's the closest vet?
Atlanta
Great. And this next one I'm going to touch on, and I'm just going to preface it with saying it's a case-to-case basis. So, leaving the dog home alone, crated or loose, for more than 8 hours on a regular basis is not recommended. Now, I work at a car dealership. My dogs are home alone for probably about 9 to 10 hours a day. Am I a bad dog owner? Maybe. But it's my life, it's my lifestyle, and for these specific dogs, it's okay. If I had a dog that couldn't hold its bladder that long, or I had an old dog or a puppy or something, that would not be ideal. But because I have these dogs, this is okay. So if someone says, like, hey, I work 4 9-hour shifts, it's not automatically like, whoa, you're leaving this dog home for 9 hours. Just make sure that they're aware that the type of dog that they get has to fit their lifestyle. So it's not an automatic disqualification if this person leaves their dog home alone for 8 hours. A lot of people work 8-hour shifts. Some people, even if they have a spouse, they work the same schedule. So, it's definitely something to be talked about, but we can't just automatically say that someone who works for 8 or 10 hours a day can't have a dog. Also, if they intend to have a dog walker come by, or a neighbor or a friend or something in the middle of the day. So it's just a discussion to be had. It's not necessarily, wow, you have a life. Sorry. But another thing to be brought up is that in the first few weeks, it's very important to make sure that the dog is being acclimated to the home and maybe spending a little bit more time with them. I've talked to a lot of people, especially for our summer events, that say, oh, I'm a teacher and I'm going to have time off. That's why I'm getting the dog, because they'll have a couple weeks to spend with them and stuff like that. And it's not necessary to take 2 weeks off from work to spend with the dog, but just being aware that, those first couple of weeks are very important in acclimating the dog. Another thing, if the applicant already has a pet, whether it's a cat, a dog, a pig, a rabbit, that's not good with dogs, and they know this, they're out, they're very outspoken about it, we don't recommend putting a dog in the home unless there's been a separate meet and greet sanctioned by the rescue. Again, we're not saying if you have a dog that's not always dog friendly, you can't get another dog, because there's definitely situations about that, unless the dog is completely vicious. But if you just have a dog that needs a slower introduction, I have one, a separate meet and greet would just probably be best to do, and that can be sanctioned by the rescue, so they can have you guys maybe meet a couple times and just make sure that it's going to work before throwing a dog into your home. Another thing, if the applicant has small children, just make a note. That is not to say that if you have small children, you can't have a dog, Kaylee. It's just to say that it's a case-to-case basis. There are some dogs that either for their energy level, for their size, or for their personality, they can't live in a home with small children because it's a risk to the dog and to the child. Doesn't mean they're mean, doesn't mean that they're aggressive in any way, shape, or form. It just means that a home with children is probably not the best fit for the dog. So all we have to do is, if they have small children, just make a note of it. Okay, they have small kids. So that way when... He's great. He can be great with any dog, though. He's great. So just make a note of it so that the rescue will know, oh, okay, they have this lovely little child here. So now we know that we have to give them a dog that will be okay with this lovely little child.
No one can see lovely little child.
Look at him.
This lovely little child. Here he is. Eating a carrot, being a very good boy, but it was his section, so he thought he'd just pipe
so
up.
Cute. The bottom line with all these things is that anything happens, continue with the call, keep answering all the questions, and then let me know. Because again, this is going to have to be a conversation. Depending on which of these circumstances arise, there's going to be a conversation at some point. And that's when I will have to get involved because I handle all the denials. And if we are going to deny this person, that's when I'll have to get in. Don't hesitate to call me, email me, Facebook me, text me. I do work full time, but I can answer a text pretty quickly. So just let me know if you have anything going on that you feel uncomfortable about, and just make sure that everything is noted. So even if you do have to have a conversation about a person, about a zip line, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize you couldn't do that with a dog under 20 pounds. Oh no, if I get a dog under 20 pounds, I won't do that. That's great. If you believe them, that's wonderful. But just make sure you write it down that you had that conversation. So the rescue knows to reiterate it if they bring this dog to you, and they say, ooh, I'm going to use a zip line, So it's just a way to make sure everything gets talked about. I will say, I've become a lot more liberal in all of this. Amanda shared with me an article that I actually realized I had read before, but it was basically about people, good people in good homes being denied for a dog because of X, Y, and Z. And there was this article where they all sat in a room, and it was like, everybody raised their hand. Take your hand down if you work more than 8 hours. Take your hand down if you have kids under 5. Take your hand down if you don't have a fence. There were all of these things, and they were left with maybe 4 people out of 200 or 300. And they're like, you're the only ones who would get a dog from these rescues.
For applicants that rent their property, that own their own condo, and that live with parents, family members, roommates, and are not the owner of the home. The reason that we included condo owners on this is because if you have a condo, you do own it. That is your home, but you live in a complex, and there's probably a condo association, and they may have specific restrictions, and we don't want you in a situation where you either have to move or give up the dog just because, we didn't do our due diligence. And the other thing is, like I touched on before, living with parents or family members or roommates and not being the homeowner, because inevitably the homeowner should have the final say as to whether or not there's a dog living there. And we just want to make sure that we've covered all our bases, because the last thing that we want is a complex, including condo complexes, apartment complexes. They may be a bit more detached, so if you're calling like a property manager or someone in the office, they may not know the applicant personally, and that's fine. Just one of the questions on the... It's okay. One of the questions on the application is a bit more personal, and, like, do you think they'll be a good dog owner, stuff like that. And it's okay that they don't know that. If they don't know the person, obviously it's just like, okay, we don't really care. That's perfectly fine, but sometimes it's a landlord or it's a homeowner, someone like that, so that information is important to know, if they know the person personally. So the landlord reference is pretty straightforward. Just making sure that they know that their tenant is interested in adopting a dog, and then going through if there are any restrictions. If it's an apartment complex or like a condo association, it may be a very lengthy list of breed restrictions or size restrictions. Just make sure you write everything down, because especially some of them have these huge lengthy lists and they exclude mixes and stuff like that. Just make sure you're getting every single thing down, because again, the last thing that we want is they adopt this dog and it's like, oh, it's a 1/8 husky. Sorry. So making sure that everything's written down, and going into the final comments forms. We've run into this situation a couple times where the landlord wants a picture of the dog, or they want to know what kind of dog it is or how big it will be, prior to approving the adoption. That's fine. Just make sure everything's noted, because on their approval letter it'll say landlord, homeowner, whatever, needs a picture of the dog, needs to know the size of the dog before we can go forward. And that's just someone who wants to make sure that, it's going to be the type of dog that they want living on their property. And that's perfectly fine. They just probably won't be able to adopt same day unless we can get a hold of that landlord pretty quickly, that, the day of the event. If you get any red flags in the landlord reference, just let me know. If you're calling parents and it's like, oh, did you know that your daughter wants to adopt a dog? No. I mean, we might have to talk about that. Just let me know, because that has happened. That situation happens in which the landlord wants a picture of a dog or the exact size of the dog, but it's important to make sure that the landlord or the homeowner is available that day to be contacted, or else they're probably not going to get that dog. Because they need that confirmation. So just letting them know, like, hey, make sure your landlord's looking at your phone that day so he can get the picture and talk to the rescue, and we can be all set with everything. It doesn't happen that often, but because it does happen occasionally, I just like to mention it. The next form we are going to go over is the vet reference cheat sheet. So usually the most straightforward and easiest, and we're doing this for anyone who either currently has a dog or a cat, or who has had a dog in the last 5 years. We do tell the applicants to give permission to the vet office to release information. Some of them do not. Not all vet offices require that. It's probably about half that really require permission. But we tell everybody to do it just in case. So if you call them and they say, oh, I haven't heard from that person, I can't release information to you. Now you're a little bit held up, so call the applicant, say, hey, you need to call your vet. Tell them that, give them permission to speak to me so I can get the information I need. And basically what we're getting from their veterinary references to make sure that their dogs or their cats, either alive or if they've passed, up to date on vaccines, for dogs on heartworm preventative, things like that. They got regular physicals and just to make sure that they were, as far as they could tell, well cared for. There's no guarantee that the person that you're talking to on the phone, whether it's a receptionist or a tech, there's no guarantee that they know the person personally, depending on the size of the practice. So if they don't, that's fine. Just say, based on the information in front of you, what are your thoughts? Or if they know them, sometimes it's great. You can get a little bit extra information from that person in the office so they can tell you, oh, actually, I do know them. They're great dog owners. The cat or the dog has to be up to date on rabies. We have run into situations multiple times where a person has a cat and they do not take the cat every year, or they do not, get the cat rabies because it's an indoor cat, something like that. Again, not an automatic denial, but when you run into it, just make sure that person's aware. It is a state law. I understand you have an indoor cat. He never gets out. I get it. But it is a state law that your cat be vaccinated against rabies. And God forbid your cat ever got out and got bitten by a raccoon or any of the rabies vectors. There would be serious issues for your cat because your cat was not vaccinated. If your cat is vaccinated, he's healthy, there's no issues. But if your cat's not vaccinated, there's going to be serious issues. So that's one of the only instances in which we ever really run into a problem with pets not being vaccinated against rabies, is usually a cat. Not an automatic denial, again, but just a conversation to be had about the importance of it. Because some people really don't realize it, and for some reason vets don't stress it, which I guess if they never brought their cat in, they wouldn't know. Distemper is another one of the core vaccines, but those are really the only core vaccines that a pet should have. If the person says, oh, they haven't gotten Lyme in 3 years, that's not a core vaccine. That's not 100% necessary. So don't take that as, oh, they don't give their dog a Lyme shot. They're bad. I don't give my dogs Lyme shots. So, that's really not one of the things that we need to be looking for. Heartworm preventative in dogs. 2 things about this. They can get it from their vet, or they can get it from a third party. Whether they get it from a third party, the vet may or may not have record of that person getting it. Some vets will retain like the faxed over sheets that they get saying they requested heartworm preventative. Some don't. So if you've been getting heartworm from 1-800-PET-MEDS for all your dog's life, the vet may not be able to tell you for sure if that dog's been on heartworm preventative. Obviously, if they've been buying it from them, they can. So if they have no proof of it, just touch with the applicant to make sure that they've been on heartworm preventative throughout their life. Something I ran into last round screening was something I haven't run into at all in screening. Vets were not stressing heartworm preventative with dogs. And I used to work in veterinary medicine, so that absolutely astounded me. I mean, I talked to not just one, like 3 or 4 people who said, oh, no one ever really told me I had to be on heartworm preventative. And being in the north, it's, you know, it's not a very, it is a pretty rare occurrence that we find heartworm up here, but it is a real thing. And these dogs that come from these events, almost all of them come from the south, where heartworm is a very real thing. And because preventative works retroactively for the past 28 days, that first dose of heartworm that you are giving them now as the adopter is extremely important. Because if they were somehow infected, that heartworm preventative will kill off all the microfilaria for the last 28 days. So don't just assume if they don't give their dog heartworm preventative that they've been told why it's necessary or how important it is. Because I ran into people who honestly didn't know. So just making sure that they are aware of what heartworm disease is and that the dog needs to be on preventative for it is very important. If a dog contracts heartworm disease, the treatment is brutal. Some dogs don't live through it. It's takes a couple months. It's injections of imidacide. There's a lot of, you went through it, right?
I've been through it.
Yeah, it's
3
terrible.
months. Yeah.
The dog has to be rested for a very long time. It's not a fun thing, and it's also expensive. Heartworm preventative is like $5 a month when you come down to it, even less sometimes, maybe $2 depending on the size of your dog. Heartworm treatment is about $3,000 to $5,000. So no matter which way you want to look at it, whether you want to go financial or comfort of the dog, I mean, no matter what way you want to look at it, we don't want these dogs coming down with heartworm. And because a lot of the dogs from the south may have already been treated and come out from heartworm, we do not want them to get infected a second time. And the rescues stress that because some of these dogs have already been through it. Is that good? Okay. Next thing is the applicant interview, the most important one. So this is going to be your most lengthy phone call, and more than likely the applicant is expecting a call from you. Sometimes I'd like to send out an email and say like, hi, I'm Danielle, I'll be doing your application, I'll be in touch with you in the next day or so. Whichever way you want to do it is fine. Just going over all the questions that are on the form and watching out for any of the red flags, like I said. This call is very positive because the applicant is usually very excited about getting a new dog. So just being friendly, personable, open to answering any questions. If there's a question that you don't know the answer to or you're not comfortable answering because of whatever reason, just let me know. And I can either give them a call back or I can send them an email and let them know. Or we can touch base and you can give them a call back with the specific questions. If they don't answer the phone, because phone tag is a really real thing in screening. If they don't answer the phone, my go-to message is I'll leave them a message and I'll say, hey, call me back. If you get my voicemail, please let me know when the best time to reach you is. Because we will, on the application, have their preferred time of contact. It'll say morning, evening, weekends, whatever. But then I like to reiterate it again when I'm leaving a message. So then if they get my voicemail again, they can say, oh, you know what? I'm home after 5. Give me a call. And especially for those that have like out-of-state numbers, which I have, a lot of people in Rhode Island won't pick up the phone because they're from Rhode Island. So if you do have one of those, they might not answer the phone initially, but then once they know it's you, they'll be like, oh, crap, I gotta answer that. So that... Ooh, hi. So that's another thing to touch. It's a doggy. Is that what he was saying?
Yes.
Okay. So the other thing that we want to stress with the applicants is how the event works. We had a lot of comments last event that people found it to be too overwhelming, and that's why they didn't end up adopting. Because they were very overwhelmed. They walked in, there was like, oh my gosh, and there was just a lot of chaos. So, you know, even if the person has been to an event before, I still want you to give them a little rundown of the event and how everything works. So once you've been approved, you'll receive an approval letter from Michelle or Amanda. Bring that letter with you the day of event and some copies. Because you've completed the pre-screening process, you'll have exclusive access to the event between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. When you arrive, come to the front and show your approval letter so we can grant you access. If you don't bring the letter, see the help desk for copy, because we'll have them for them as well. Once you are in, you'll see many dogs, and it can be overwhelming. Each dog has a handler. The handler will have a little bit of info about the dog. They can let you know. And if you're interested in that dog, you can then go to the rescue that the dog belongs to and fill out any additional paperwork that you need to. He's learning to talk today of all days.
He wants to be a screener. Practicing.
So, one thing I put it in bold, the adoption of these dogs are to the discretion of the rescue that they come from. You can be an all-star applicant, but if your life or your situation, whether it's your home, your yard, your family, if it's not right for that particular dog, it's just not right. They want to make sure that the dog goes into a home that will be right for them. And just because your home isn't right for them doesn't mean your home is not right for a dog. It just, you know, may mean that this particular dog would do better in a home that's different from yours. And that's something I really like to explain to people, because sometimes, you know, they'll be like, oh, I tried to adopt this dog and I didn't have a fence and they denied me. And it's like, that's not what happened. Because some dogs do need a fenced-in yard. Just whether it's a breed thing, whether it's an age thing, some dogs need a fenced-in yard. And if the rescue is saying, you know, we'd really prefer this dog to go to a home with a fenced-in yard, that's nothing against you. They're just saying that for this particular dog, it would be the best situation. And then some rescues also require home visits, or, you know, they need to talk to your vet again. So being pre-screened doesn't guarantee you'll leave with a dog that day. You're in the best shape possible. So if they see a dog that's with a specific rescue, they should go with that rescue. And we share our information with all these rescues, so they can even take the information that we've already gathered and use that for their screening process. But just make sure you stress that. If there's a particular dog that they're interested in, don't wait until the event. Go straight to the rescue. And then, like I said before, if the applicant has a dog and they intend to bring it to the event, that they must be up to date on rabies. They must bring proof with them, and the dog is not allowed to be inside, so make sure you bring somebody else with you. And if they are left in the car, we will smash them. So next one is going to be for the personal reference. It can get a bit lengthy, but it's important for information verification. If you had a weird feeling with the applicant on the phone about something, it's a good way to back it up. By talking to the personal reference. If they had like a weird story about what happened to their last dog, like, oh, it just be like, hey, you know their dog Charlie that they had? What happened to him? And the personal reference will be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. You know, sometimes people are apprehensive about telling us things, and the personal references can add on a different perspective. It doesn't have to be negative all the time either. But it's helpful to get that. Another helpful thing is, I hate to say that applicants try to lie to us, because they really don't. But sometimes people look at the application and they're like, oh, they're asking me if I have a fence. Yes, I have a fence. Oh, they're asking me if I have this. Yes, I have this. Oh, they want this. Yes, I have that. And they don't realize that we don't need those things. So asking, like, the personal reference, oh, do they have a fence? It's just a way to verify everything that the applicant has told us. And if they tell you anything that kind of throws you off or makes you question anything else, just let me know, and we can talk it out with the applicant and all that. If you're not able to reach the personal reference, one particular personal reference, just go back to the applicant and say, like, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of Louise. She's not answering her phone. Is there somebody else that you could give to me? Or could you maybe shoot her a text and have her call me? Because it's the same situation. Maybe they don't recognize your number, so they're not answering the phone. But we can, of course, get another personal reference if we have a really hard time getting a hold of that person. Personal references cannot be family members. It says this on the live application that they fill out online a few times. They still do it, and some of them, again, ignorance doesn't always have a negative connotation. Sometimes people just don't read things, and they're like, oh yeah, my sister, she's great. So they might not even be trying to hide it. They may just be like, oh yeah, here's my sister, she's a reference. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily they're trying to deceive us. They just might not realize. So if they give you a family member, just make sure that you ask for another reference that's a friend or, you know, a neighbor or coworker, something like that, because we can't use family members for references. And if you're talking to the reference and you find out that they're a family member, again, doesn't have to be deceitful, just it happens to come up that they're a family member, just make sure you go back and you get a reference that is not a family member. If you're talking to an applicant and it comes up that they've had a dog in the last 5 years that they either didn't mention on their application or they didn't put a vet reference for, it happens. Just make them aware that we're going to need a vet reference for them. A lot of people will say, oh, well, my dog's passed away, why do you need that reference? And it's only to confirm that while they were alive, they were well cared for. So just making sure that if they do mention that they've had a dog in the last 5 years, we get a vet reference for them.
I do call a vet reference. I do find out that they have no record of the rabies vaccine, but the person took the dog to a clinic, and I find that out when calling the applicant. So what I would do is have the applicant scan those records and email them to me, and I will forward that to Danielle and mark that in my, is to print the live forms out, and I have a stack of all the live forms that I keep. And as I'm talking to an applicant or a reference, I write all the answers down. I can write notes. I can keep track of what I'm saying. If I need to go back and go over something with them, I can circle it. If I find a red flag that they said. And then once we hang up, I go on the form and enter it.
Sometimes you'll find that when you're doing your forms, they span over 3 days. So when you get to your final comments form, you might not remember what you talked to the applicant about 3 days ago. So I keep a little notepad with some extra notes, because sometimes you have a really lengthy conversation with them, and that's good stuff that you want for your form and you can't remember. So I'm kind of what Amy does too, but if you don't want to print everything out or go through it, you can just keep little notes on each person. On final comments really quick. To us, this is probably the most important form that we see. So once you guys finish all of your other forms, so your applicant and your landlord and your references and your vets, that's when you're going to email Michelle and myself and Danielle as well, just letting us know that that applicant is completely finished. That way we can get started on their summary form. So every applicant, once they're approved, they get 3 things in an email from myself and Michelle. They get a summary letter that goes over everything that you guys have talked to them about, that the rescue wants to know, their name, their address, who, you know, all of that. And then a little summary of all the important information. They get another form that gets them into the event early. So that's why we say make sure you tell them that they want to maybe print 1 or 2 copies of these and bring them with them. And I stress it in my email to them as well, so that they know. So just as we have on here, 400 applicants creates 2,000 forms. So the better you guys do at compiling all of your important information in these forms, the easier it is for Michelle and I to create that summary. So you'll notice that we've changed the final comments forms this year completely. We've made it so that you have to fill in all of that important information again. How many people in the house? Is their yard fenced? And then we also left a box where you guys can then add any extra information that you think is important.
And to put
to
all
us.
the information from the top, put that into that.
If
and
you
then
summarize all of the top information, we will love you to death, because then we can copy it and we can paste it and we can send it. But if you don't, like what happened last year is we'd have to go through like
all the forms.
all of the forms in the drive and find all of the missing information, and that took up a ton of time. So that's why we're hoping with the way we've reformatted this form, we can see everything in one place in case you guys do leave anything out. So that form is a little different. You'll notice that. This form comes directly to us. Nobody else sees it unless they're in the drive. So you can be completely honest with us here. If you had a strange conversation, if there are any red flags, your personal feelings on this applicant, you can let us know. You don't have to hold back or anything. We see this and it helps. And just so you guys know too, if you have a conversation with someone about a tie out or a lead, make sure you note that, because we will note that as well in the summary form so that the rescues know we had a conversation and you might want to touch on heartworm and, you know, vet appointments with this person. We will add that in there respectfully, so because obviously the applicant gets that form as well. I think Danielle went over red flags, so I don't think we need to do, but if you are on the second page of this, you'll see we've gone through some examples for this is how we would really love for you to summarize everything for us when you're done and you get to that bottom box on the final comments form. So I'll read one real quick just so you guys get an idea. This is what if you don't summarize what we end up doing. So if we can copy and paste it, even better. But Janice is retired. She is active, enjoys walking every day. She's looking for a medium-sized dog, puppy to young adult. She enjoys the company of a dog and would like to have a companion. She does not have a fenced-in yard, plans to leash walk, lives in a quiet cul-de-sac in a retirement community. She would prefer a dog who isn't very vocal due to her quiet neighborhood. Her dog will be left home alone no more than 3 hours a day in a crate until trained to be left loose. Janice plans to go to training classes with the adopted dog. She rents and is restricted to one dog under 35 pounds with breed restrictions for pit bulls, Rottweilers, and German Shepherds. Landlord requires picture of dog before allowing adoption. So that is everything that the rescue wants to know, summarized right at the bottom there. So they can quickly read that and they now know everything about that applicant. So that's why if you guys summarize like that first, that's perfect. We can copy and paste it. We don't
Knows all, or we're just letting you guys know. We follow up when we go to do that summary form. We touch base with the applicant. We let them know that their summary letter is coming, and we make sure that they're aware that their references were contacted and that we spoke with and checked in as well.
Tell us all about your brand new experience as a screener and a volunteer, and tell us about what you've got here.
So I'm a little bit OCD and I like everything to be organized so that I can keep track of it all. So I made this little binder. I have like the screening forms are in here, and soon enough all of these forms that we received today will be in there. It's just so I can keep track of everything and I know what I'm doing and I don't miss anything.
Thank you very much. See, a perfect screener. Well, we'll see.